Welcome to episode 3 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. I am your host, David G. Firestone, and today we're going to be talking about the charter system and why I think it needs to go. Now, the charter system has been controversial since its implementation in 2016. There are 36 charters that NASCAR, I don't know if they're distributed or I don't know what the process was. But basically, the charter system, a race can hold 40 cars. There are 36 charters. So that means there are 4 teams, theoretically, per race, at the bare minimum, that won't make the race. Now, why am I pointing this out? Well, if you look at you go to Racing Reference and you look at all the races in 2021, only one singular race, the Daytona 500, had more than 40 cars attempt to qualify. Every other race, there was no risk of any team that showed up not making the race, okay? And this might not be an issue, but if you think about it, these charters are able to be bought and sold on the open market. There was one of them that I think went for $13.5 million a few weeks ago. Why? Why would you pay that much money for a charter? There's no... I could understand if this was in 2016 and you had 43 cars on a weekly basis that were trying to make the race and it just got cut down to 40. Okay, that one I get. But why, when there is zero risk of not making a race, would you even consider paying that much money for a charter? I mean, you're pretty much paying for a guarantee to make the Daytona 500. And this is not a new issue. This has been an issue since the beginning. I don't get why you just can't have a system. You qualify where you qualify, and there are no guarantees. I just don't get it. And these charters are bankrupting smaller teams. I mean, look at the number of teams that have either merged or flat out disappeared between 2016 and today, and it's just infuriating. The charter system is like politics in that it seems to be set up to protect the people who really don't need to be protected. Because your Hendricks, your Childresses, your Roushes, your Gibbs, your Penske's, they don't need it. They are in no way, shape, or form in any danger of not making a race. But you've got the smaller teams, like the independent teams, like Wickware Racing. You know, just the smaller independent guys who are trying to make something. And I get that you need people to come in 35th, but you shouldn't be bankrupting them to do this. And that's another thing. Why is there a performance standard? Why does NASCAR have the capacity to take away a charter from a team that is not doing what they consider to be a good on-track performance? You really think these guys want to come in 35th? No, they want to come in first. They don't have the money, they don't have the technical skills, they don't have a technical alliance, but they're doing the best they can. And so when NASCAR comes in and says, well, you're not putting in a good effort, we're taking your charter away, I mean, that's a fate worse than death. Because that literally, you've lost the one thing that you can sell and make money from. Because, again, these guys are doing the best they can with the equipment that they have. And from my perspective, we should be doing everything we can to bring in people into the grandstand. We need teams in the garage. We need fans on TV. We need fans on social media. Let's not make ourselves look bad by screwing over the little guy. And the charter, again, if there were other aspects in terms of, like, maybe if there was like a profit sharing agreement or something, I could get that. But it's literally, whoa, you're one of 36 cars guaranteed to make the race. Hey, great. If there is no danger of a team not making a race, it's completely useless. And I know that's going to sound like bad news, but you've got a system that doesn't work, hasn't really worked, probably isn't ever going to work the way that people want it to. Get rid of it. I mean, I don't understand why people still use certain legacy technologies. Like, I had a job, this was in 2006, where our computer system went down one day. And the technician comes in and reboots it, and a Windows 95 logo pops up in 2006. And this was not a small-time company. This was a company that had billions in profits. But because it was cheap, they kept using Windows 95. Let's take a system that doesn't work, has never worked the way it's supposed to, and never will work the way it's supposed to, and just keep it because, well, that's how we do things. Yeah, there's a reason I'm not looking at a CRT TV in my office anymore. There's a reason I don't own a flip phone anymore. There's a reason I do not have a VHS player anymore, or a cassette player, or hell, even a CD player at this point, because it's completely useless. Are there film cameras still in existence? Are there film movie cameras still? No. None of these things are around anymore because better systems have been put in place. And I wish the NASCAR charter system would go the way of the 8-track player. It was good for what we needed it for, but the instant something better came around, it got dropped like a bad habit and never came back. Even with all the retro people, retro music, retro video games, nobody's making 8-tracks anymore. And there's a very good reason. They just weren't good. And neither is the NASCAR charter system. And again, you just look at some of the teams that have gone under because they couldn't get charters, or they couldn't keep affording the charter because again, a system that makes no sense and is designed to screw over the people it really should be helping. Welcome to America. Alright, I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to cheer myself up, and then we'll get to this week's episode of Wheel Reviews. So I am back, I am calmed down, and I'm going to talk about something I watched recently for this week's Wheel Reviews. It's not a movie per se, but it was broadcast on ABC in 1971. It's called Once Upon a Wheel. And it's hosted by Paul Newman, well-known actor and race car driver. And it discusses various aspects of auto racing. It shows some historical footage. It has a few historical cars. It has some cars which were new and modern at the time, including NASCAR. And keep in mind, this was 71. The 79 Daytona 500 hadn't happened yet, so NASCAR was actually really still regional. It wasn't national. But they talk about a lot of the various different technical aspects, and it's actually a pretty well done piece for the most part. I do have a few complaints. And I had this same complaint. I'm trying to remember the name of the documentary. It was a documentary about one of Ford's Formula One programs in like 1970s, around the same time. And it was a good documentary about the development of a car and the issues it had and the way that they were fixed. But I guess the people who made it were getting bored, so they tried to go a little artsy at certain points. It doesn't help. And that's a problem here, because it's fascinating to watch from a modern standpoint about some of the technical issues and technical designs and the designs of the race cars. Old racing footage never gets old to watch. But when you start trying to make things needlessly artsy, I mean, if you cut like 2/3 of the artsy stuff out, it would still be interesting, it would still be well done, it would still be fun to watch, it would still be interesting to watch and informative, but it just wouldn't be as drawn out. And that's my big issue. It's good, but it has the potential to be great. And it slogs on. I go into these movies, I haven't seen them before, so I go in open-minded. This one I actually would have liked, but there's no reason for this documentary to be over 30 minutes. I'm sorry. You could have had a 20-minute long documentary. It would, without the artsy stuff, and it would still be great. But there's no reason this needs to be more than an hour. 40 minutes long, no. Yeah, and I'm getting a little disappointed with some of the racing movies I'm coming across in recent years. Especially, and it's just, you can't make racing something that it isn't. What's the word I'm looking for here? You can't make racing something it's not just to make a documentary interesting. You don't need to make it artsy. Especially if we're talking 1970s racing. And again, the racing footage is great. The cars are beautiful, to be honest with you. Paul Newman is actually really good in this. But again, too artsy, too much. So I'm going to give this a C. It has a lot of good, it has a lot of bad, and so they both really cancel each other out. Now, I'm going to do a second part of wheel reviews, because I was reading the book on the EV1 from GM, the first electric car that was ever made. Its cancellation led to it actually was a functional car, and its cancellation and subsequent destruction of the cars led to a lot of controversy. Well, doing my own research and doing my own napkin math, I came to a conclusion that a lot of people aren't going to like, but the truth often isn't. The EV1 was basically useless and destined to fail. Why do I say this? Well, let's look at the two places it was tested out. It was in Southern California and Tucson, Arizona. Not places exactly known for bad weather. You have the fact that you really couldn't do anything except drive to and from work in these cars. If there's inclement weather, forget about it. It's going to be useless. So it's already useless to a huge majority of the people. If there's snow on the ground, it ain't working. If you have kids, forget about it. If you need to pick up groceries, forget about it. Even for, it has a very, very limited, very, very limited range. And I say this because if you were to drive from Chicago to Milwaukee, no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't do it all in one trip. You would literally have to drive a certain amount, figure out a place to charge up your car for 8 hours, drive to Milwaukee, do whatever you want to do in Milwaukee, hope your car's charged up enough, and repeat the process. You couldn't drive from Tucson to Phoenix. You couldn't drive from, LA to the Napa Valley. You couldn't buy groceries. You couldn't use it if you had kids, so it's very, very limited. Additionally, unlike modern electric cars, there was no backup system where if your battery dies, you could put gas in it and it still functions. Now, granted, the technology needed to make this feasible wasn't even remotely in its infancy. And then we have the issue of, well, GM killed the electric car. I'm telling you this right now, I don't think they did. If anything, they tried. If anything, they were the ones to actually do it, because Ford and Dodge, they certainly didn't. And there was, and it's like some people actually are of the opinion that, well, GM wanted the electric car to fail. No, they didn't. They were working with the United States government, and they were spending millions of. The amount of money that was pumped into this system was obscene. And just it was not going to be. It was never going to be feasible. I think I've read a couple of interviews where, depending on who you ask, the cars themselves cost between $100,000 to as much as $250,000 per unit. Yet the only way that they could get these things off the dealer lot is if they had to lease them for $35,000. So you're taking a $65,000 to $215,000 loss per unit to get these cars off the floor. They were. Now, it has been reported that they're fun to drive, but you really couldn't do anything except drive to and from work. So you're spending like $35,000 for a car that's next to useless. And there were revisions, there were adjustments, there were they tried everything humanly possible. But at the end of the day, they were pouring money into something that was never going to be profitable. It was dead-end technology even from the beginning. It couldn't be advanced anymore. It was just, the writing was on the wall at that point. And why the leased cars were taken back and destroyed hasn't really officially been discussed, but I do have a theory. Because if you were going to let the customers keep their cars, you'd have to be able to provide service. Now, when you have a vehicle that breaks all the rules, you're not going to be able to find people who are able to fix it rather easily. So you either had to have one or two dealerships dedicated to EV1 maintenance in their various areas, or you'd have to spend the time and money to implement EV1 maintenance at all your dealerships, which is, again, not feasible. So they'd already lost hundreds and hundreds of millions, if not billions, on this failed venture. So they were just done. And I can't say that I blame them. And again, the major problem as to why the EV1 had the reputation that it did, why environmentalists were pissed and all that, I can sum it up for you very simply. Too much was expected too soon. The technology needed to make the electric car feasible would take decades to perfect. Now we're here. I mean, people who knew me in high school were at one point were joking about, oh yeah, there'll be electric car races. They won't be fun to watch. Formula E is fun as all hell to watch. So yeah, I'm done ranting for this particular episode. I really don't want this to be like a super serious podcast, but it is what it is. So, what am I going to talk about next week? I don't know. Well, I do know that I don't know what I should have jotted down some notes. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do 10 racing movies, the 5 best and 5 worst for the final wheel reviews before we get into talking about the Clash in California. And I'll figure out a topic to talk about at some point during the week. But come back next week. I'm Dave Firestone. Leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. I will see you for episode 4 of Driver Seat Blog Radio.